Right, so welcome to this next in a series of leadership takeaways. And here with me today, I am really happy to welcome Patrick Henry from QuestFusion. Hi, Patrick, how are you doing?
Doing well, Rachel. How are you?
I'm very good. And as you will hear, Patrick has an accent. And previously, I've interviewed mainly English people, one Spanish lady before, but Patrick, I'm actually met on through Twitter, and I think we liked each other's tweets because we're both coaches, and Patrick is a consultant coach for some big tech companies in the US. And I just got talking to you and said, would you do this interview? So thank you, Patrick, for doing this interview. And hopefully it'll illustrate to some people some of the things we've come across as coaches. And it's always great to provide stories, I find. So I will start with the interview as I formally do, which is by asking you the first part of a leadership component we look at is strategy. So when you're looking at your strategy, and it could be your personal strategy or when you're consulting with clients, what would you say is the kind of priority for you with strategy?
I think that kind of even taking a step back from strategy, the first thing I try to look at is what's your vision for the future? You know, the broader, the real big picture context of things. And, you know, I like to look at those things in kind of the 5 to 10 year time frame. But doing strategic planning in the 5 to 10 year time frame is really kind of a waste of time because it's very difficult to have the understanding of markets and customers, and things are so dynamic that even doing 3-year planning is challenging. Really, the first 18 to 24 months is kind of the focus area. But I think when you can get that emotional connection of what you're trying to accomplish with your goals and with your strategy, you have a much better chance of getting people on board and moving in the right direction, because you get that visceral feeling about what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. Yeah. So I think the vision thing is kind of a big deal. And in the case of QuestFusion, you know, we want to help entrepreneurs and startup companies build successful companies just like I have in the past. So, you know, we want to help them define their strategies, implement their strategies. We're not just about, you know, giving guidance and giving advice. We're about execution, especially on the marketing side. And, you know, the strategy, what that really does is it grounds the vision into more of an actionable plan. So that is a big focus of mine. Most of the clients that I work with in kind of the startup and emerging growth world, they have a strategy, and they don't feel like they really need much help with their strategy, but they're typically not thinking about it in the same way that I do, where I've got a very systematic process that I take companies through, that we really define what their market is, you know, what their total available market and their served available market, how fast those markets are growing, you know, defining their ideal customer, and, you know, sometimes called, you know, a customer avatar, but really trying to get inside the head of your customer and understanding their problems and their concerns from their perspective, and what is a personal win for those types of people versus just their company. So really understanding that piece. Then kind of going from there, looking at the competitive landscape and what's going on, not only with potential direct competitors, but substitute products and new entrants, and looking at industry structure, and then going through strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So, you know, kind of a traditional strategic planning. And the reason why I know a lot of startup companies haven't gone through this rigorous process is I look at their presentations when they're trying to raise capital, because I'm also an angel investor. And I have a lot of friends that are venture capitalists that I'll come in and do diligence projects with them as well. And many of the companies, they talk 90% of the time about the product and 10% about the business. And what investors really want to hear is maybe 20% about the product and 80% about the business. But in order to be able to do that effectively, you need to have gone through this kind of strategic planning process. And it doesn't have to be something that's super heavyweight and bureaucratic like your IBM or General Electric. So there's streamlined ways to do this to really make it more effective for startups and emerging growth companies. And based on my decades of experience of running companies, raising over $200 million in equity financing for my companies and executing over $2 billion of M&A transactions, I've got a pretty good sense of what it takes to put these things together, which allows the company to be more effective in executing on their plan, but also gives them a better chance of raising capital. So that's kind of the context of strategy that I think about.
Wow, it's like you've literally encompassed 3 years of my learning of business and how it fits together literally in what you've just said. And just to give a bit more context, I didn't mention you're from San Diego, which we all don't like you for because it's really nice weather out there and we're freezing. It's December the 19th here and freezing fog is descending on us. But to context to you've built businesses. You've been a managing director, CEO of businesses in the technology businesses, hardware, software, and chip businesses. And like you rightly say, you've learned by experience of not focusing on the product, focusing on the client, on the strategy, but interesting, when you were talking, there was a couple of things that came to my mind. Is firstly, you said more about the feeling and the emotion, which was really interesting, because when I'd watched a guy called Wim Hof, who is all about challenging the human body, and I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a really great guy, and he understands the mind and the body and the way it works. And he talks about if you can engage with a person and get that feeling, that emotion, then you've got them. So that's very important. But I think critically, Jay Abraham, who advises people like Tony Robbins, he actually talks about, where was I going with this? He was like saying that was right, about the product. People fall in love with the product too often when they're running their own business, and it's all about falling in love with the customer and understanding the customer needs and what is your value as a company. So that's from the way I understand it from the coaching perspective. But you literally have done the nitty gritty, the operational side of a business. But ultimately, I think what we've both said is the same thing, focusing on the customer's needs, the value, and then the strategy that goes behind. And another thing Jay Abraham was saying was not making things tactical, making it strategical. So it's more in the long term, like what you were saying. Yeah, you've got to build your long-term plan, but try not to focus on too much of your product campaigns being tactical, like getting that quick purchase, but losing the customer in the process, as opposed to focusing on how can I actually maybe lose a bit of money on this product campaign, but the customer falls in love with me. And so I'm losing money for that long-term customer gain. Do you find that with strategy, that sometimes you really, although I totally agree with you, it's not focused on the long term, we've got to look at short-term behaviors and habits. What are we building towards? Because the long-term could deviate from where we might be going.
Sure.
But do you find that it sometimes you've got to take the loss with the strategy to gain those key long-term customers?
Well, I mean, it's always challenging to lose money with the hopes of making money in the future. And a lot of startups do that. And a lot of startups have to do that if you're dealing with very complex product developments, intense engineering programs. With a number of the companies that I've run, you have to raise tens of millions of dollars to develop the product before you really start generating a lot of revenue. But I think a lot of companies are, they're doing it more now, but they're not applying these kind of lean startup principles where, develop a prototype, develop a minimum viable product, as they call it, do more market testing, see what works, see what doesn't work, with your customers. I think another thing you mentioned, that it's important is, strategy is essential, having a strategic plan, having an understanding of where you're going is important. I use a couple of quotes around that. Yogi Berra, who was, he played for the Yankees and then eventually was a manager for the Yankees. It's like if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else. Or Benjamin Franklin. If you don't plan, you're basically going to have a big problem. So the other part of that, though, is without execution, if you're just always in perpetual planning mode or always in perpetual optimization mode, you're not going to accomplish very much either. So you need to actually execute on the plan. You need to get into action. One of the things that I talk about with respect to startups is, the primary competitive advantage of a startup versus a large company is your speed of decision making and speed of execution. Big companies have more resources, they have more people, they have smart people too, they can be innovative, but it's hard to swing around and pick up a water skier if you're on an aircraft carrier. So their ability to react in real time, what's going on, is difficult because they've developed these processes and level of bureaucracy to make sure that some bonehead doesn't tank the company. So in a startup, you don't have very much to lose. So you can be more aggressive, you can lean forward, you can have a bias towards action, and you need to take advantage of that. And you need to make decisions. And then if it turns out you make the wrong decision, you can course correct along the way. But kind of analysis paralysis is not what you want when you're doing strategic planning or even business planning. You do a strategic plan to set the foundation for your business plan. And then you need to have specific goals in mind and specific things you're trying to accomplish. And you need to do that as cost effectively as possible. But if you're trying to get into a new market, and I've done this with previous companies and I do with QuestFusion, I've put more money into QuestFusion than I've taken out up to this point. And the company has been around about 2 years. Now, could I have done it differently and focused more on the face-to-face consultancy and not building the online platform? Yeah, and I probably would be ahead of the game, but there's a finite amount of time that I personally have to coach executives, and there's a finite amount that I can charge for my time, reasonably charge for my time. So when you think about it in that context, there's a ceiling on the income level that I can make as an executive coach. If I become more of a virtual coach and a marketing agency, and I can delegate things and put processes into place and allow people to kind of do it yourself, maybe with some level of hands-off, a little bit of hands-on, but more hands-off coaching, then the scalability of that business model is much larger. But it takes more time. If you're online, although I'm kind of a known entity within the semiconductor industry, I'm not a known entity online. So it's taken me a long time to build up my authority, to build up my presence in terms of online. And that's in social media, and my website, and Google search. And there's an investment to be able to do that. And I have to write a lot. Part of the 80% that I work on the online platform is I'm writing blog stories all the time. I'm writing contributed articles for Entrepreneur Magazine, for Forbes, for Fast Company, for TechCo, doing these types of interviews. And you have to do that to raise your visibility. And then as people start seeing you and people start hearing you, they're like, oh, this guy isn't like all these other people that say they know what they're doing. He actually does know what he's doing. So it's one of those things where you've got to do both. I kind of, the summary, I guess, is early in my career, I asked one of my mentors, what's more important, strategy or tactics? And it's like, he said, in order to stay alive, you have to both eat and breathe. Now, if you don't breathe, you die quicker. But if you don't eat, you will eventually die. And eating is like strategy and breathing is like tactics. So you need to have both in order to build a successful company.
Yeah, yeah. And as you were talking then, and you were saying about the online, and the next component we move on to is strengths and weaknesses. So my next question would be for you is, when you're talking strategically and the way you're building online and then balancing the tactics, what would you say are some of your strengths and weaknesses that arm you for the way that you are as a business consultant from what you provided as a CEO? What's been your
I think that, well, first thing, and this is one of the things I like about your philosophy and your practice, and aligns with some of the other people that I've kind of aligned myself with in terms of what kind of traditional executive coaching, and the way I break that down is more traditional executive coaching, or people like yourself, people like my friend Leland Sandler, that basically come at it from a human relations performance standpoint. And the way that Leland characterizes himself is like, I'm a strength coach. He says, I'm a strength coach, and Patrick, you're more of a offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Because I'm not, although I'm coaching per se, what I'm really doing is providing strategic advisory services. But I'm providing that to other CEOs, and I'm doing it from the standpoint that I've walked in their shoes, I've walked their path, and I can say, I've seen this before, avoid this. This may work, but I've tried that 3 or 4 different versions of that, and it's never worked for me. Whereas what, a traditional executive coach, they're going to focus on being a strength coach and getting to this idea of strengths and weaknesses. I think the latest literature philosophy around this is, don't work so much on your weaknesses, focus on your strengths, hire for your weaknesses. And, the historical stuff 20 years ago is compensate, try to build on your weaknesses, try to correct your weaknesses. And I think that the new philosophy is much more in alignment of like success in athletics, success in sport. And I think that it's the HR consultants, I call them, like yourself, the strength coaches, are really onto something by saying, let's focus on your strengths. So if I look at my strengths, I'm very good at building a strategic plan. I'm not necessarily the idea guy, that's going to come up with this visionary breakthrough idea. I'm more of the practical, how do I make that idea into a terrific business, and how do we make money? But that requires strategy and it requires business planning. Then when it comes down to the nitty-gritty details of execution, although I'm an engineer by education and background, I've been a business person most of my career, and academically I was very strong as an engineer. But I'm not the guy that's going to be sitting on the bench coding and testing and doing all those things. When I did that early in my career, I was incredibly bored. So it's it's not only about having a set of capabilities, it's about having a level of interest. And the engineers that I've hired that are awesome engineers, they love doing that stuff. I mean, that's what floats their boat. So, I need to have enough of an understanding about technology that I can ask the difficult questions and the probing questions, and look at things from not only the ground level, but the 5,000-foot view and the 30,000-foot view, where some of the guys that are doing the nitty-gritty work, they can't do that as well. So it's complementary. I can leverage my strengths around strategy, around dealing with customers, around understanding I'm kind of a universal translator, which I can take something very technical and describe it in layman's terms to a client or to an investor. So being able to kind of understand the audience and articulate and explain things in a way that an engineer might not be able to. And one of the things that I do a number of CEO interviews, predominantly with technology companies. And I do that so that people can see, and these are typically very cool companies. They've got very cool technology. But many times the founder CEO is somebody out of academia or somebody that's a first-time entrepreneur, and they really understand the technology, but they don't understand how to describe it in such a way that people like you and people like the vast majority of people on the planet would actually be able to understand. So those are the things I try to focus on. I try to focus on strategy, marketing, positioning, business planning, leadership and management, checking with the team, making sure things are on track, coaching, making sure people are moving in the proper direction, and kind of hire for the weaknesses.
So you're basically, what I'm hearing, you're very good at sort of focusing, be able to find out what works very quickly and what doesn't work, and then be able to understand multifaceted perspectives, which is extremely important because the whole world runs on perspectives.
Yeah, and the world generally, but especially in startups, you're dealing with a large amount of uncertainty and ambiguity, and you need to be comfortable in that kind of an environment. I think a lot of entrepreneurs that use that as an excuse to do no planning and say, well, that's unknowable. You know, why would I even spend time trying to understand the market, because the market's going to change, or the customer. And I think that's really a cop-out. What you have to do is apply your best knowledge that you can today, understand the customers and the markets the best that you can, and use your intelligence and your foresight to try to look over the horizon. And to me, the best way to do that is look at broader ecosystem, broader macro market trends that, you know, you want to be swimming with the stream, not against the stream, and be able to recognize those kind of pattern recognition early enough that you can kind of set a direction. And some of those things won't change. Some of the specifics, where the fish are swimming and, you know, what the weather's doing might change, but the river is going to continue to flow in the same direction. So that's something else I'm pretty good at, is kind of looking over the horizon and saying, okay, this is what I see going on. We'll make a plan based on what the current situation analysis market environment is, and then we're going to execute towards that. And if we have to course correct along the way, we'll course correct along the way.
Yeah, very good. Very, very important, be able to kind of forecast, especially nowadays, I should imagine, in such a volatile market that we have.
Yeah, a lot of it you need to look, you know, all the businesses I've directly run have been business to business. You know, there are some businesses I consult for that do business to consumer. But in the business to business world, you're typically somewhere along the food chain. And being able to look one step down the food chain, I'll give you an example. My most recent product company, Entropic Communications, a chip company, our direct customers were people that build set-top boxes and routers that sit next to your TV for pay TV service. If we just talked to our customers and got our direct customers' perspective, we would not have understood the problem and the solution and the value proposition. So we had to look downstream one step and look at the pay TV operators. And these are the people like Comcast and Time Warner, and, you know, in the UK, you know, B Sky B, and you know, British Telecom.
Yeah.
And you know, so you have to understand kind of what those people's problems are, what solutions they're looking for, and is this a big enough problem to garner their attention. Then, you know, if you can even look one step further downstream of what consumers are doing and what consumers value, and, you know, is there an ecosystem of other things that are going on around it that will support a fertile environment for growth, or you're dealing with something that you're never going to grow anything here because the other pieces aren't in place. So being able to understand the ecosystem becomes very important. So looking downstream and looking at the ecosystem and saying, okay, is the timing right? Maybe I've got a great solution, but the timing's not right. You know, maybe this is something that's going to be important 5 years down the road, but you know, we're going to be, you know, using a machete trying to chop through the jungle as opposed to driving on a paved road. So being able to understand some of those things becomes very important.
So what would you say are, when faced with majority of clients, are their kind of strengths and weaknesses, or is it just completely dependent on the person?
There are trends for sure. I think in a lot of the early stage, growth stage startups that I deal with, a lot of times you have first time entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are kind of the technology specialist. They were the inventor of the idea and they're now running the company. So they don't really have a lot of the business background, but they have a tremendous technology background. They may or may not have a good kind of business sense, but they may not have some of the tools. then you get other people that are, serial entrepreneurs. They've been there a couple times. Maybe this is their first time that they've been a CEO, but they've been around business. They kind of have this, they're more the business marketing strategy person, and they're partnered with a technology type of chief technology officer person that maybe came up with the idea, and their challenges are somewhat different. And they might need more of a sounding board, where they have been there and done that, but they haven't been there and done that from the same perspective as somebody that's, run 4 companies. So their pattern recognition maybe isn't as highly developed or as highly refined as somebody like me.
Yeah, understood. So the next part we move on to is looking at resources. For you, Patrick, what sort of resources go into making up your whole support system for you as a person and as a business? And traditionally, how would you arm yourself to command resources around you? Because sometimes resources for companies are people, and you have to really, obviously be very astute in understanding and leading people, or it might be products and systems and technology. So when you look at your resources and you think, okay, I need a whole support structure going into this next project, how do you go about, commanding and effectively getting the best out of the resources that you need for that project?
Yeah, I mean, it especially in young companies and very established companies, resource scarcity is always a problem. There's never enough money, and there's never enough people to do the things you really want to do. So you have to live in an environment of, constrained resources. And if you're in a startup environment, it's even more pronounced because you don't have some cash cow business that's, driving a lot of revenue, driving a lot of profitability to fuel new development. You're basically either having to do it out of your own pocket, or with friends and family money, or with angel investors, or maybe even eventually venture capitalists. So based on that scarcity, you have to look at, what can I reasonably accomplish with the available resources, and where do I bring people on board versus when do I use contract resources? So the way I think about it is, if you're building a company that's based on some key core competencies, those core competencies better be a part of your company and not an outsourced resource. So if, as an example, if developing, mixed signal chip technology is essential to your product strategy, and you're using an outsourced team for mixed signal, intellectual property development, you probably don't have a very good strategy. On the other hand, if, you're a mixed signal chip development technology company, and you're outsourcing accounting and bookkeeping and legal, that's probably okay. So you have to say, okay, how much am I willing to spend? How much am I willing to invest in this company over what time frame? And then prioritize what, people resources and non-people resources you should bring in. And one thing I've always coached, my team, other executives about, is to be very careful about your hiring decisions, because the last thing you want to do is hire somebody and then have to later lay them off. You're going to negatively impact them. You're going to negatively impact their family. So make sure that not only is it the right person, but do you even need somebody to do that job on a full-time basis, or is there another way to solve the problem and get that work done without bringing somebody on board? On the flip side of that, if it's a core competency and that's something where you're building the foundation of your company around that, you really do need to hire that person, and you need to find the best person possible that you can reasonably afford and that will fit well with your team and your culture. So that's kind of the people side of it.
And you would apply that same ethos to your resources as well, assuming with your company?
Yeah, I mean, I'm bootstrapping QuestFusion 100% myself. I don't have any outside investors. So although I've made a reasonable investment in the building of QuestFusion, I've been pretty frugal about it. And I test to see what works, what resonates with my clients, what doesn't resonate with clients. And you're kind of like in this adjusting mode. And it's very different running a professional services company. And we do have some products. We have training videos, we have workshops, but it's a professional services company as opposed to a product company. So the business model is different. You know, I have a great understanding of, at least I think I have a great understanding of what other CEOs need now, but in getting into it, they're like, well, no, I really don't need that. Or at least I'm not willing to pay for it, or whatever it is. So kind of trying to feel it out and see what works and what doesn't work, while at the same time kind of building out this online platform. You got to do it cost effectively, or, you know, you're going to run out of money, you know, or you're going to run out of time. So yeah, I mean, I definitely apply, you know, so-called lean startup principles to QuestFusion. So kind of what does that mean for hiring, and what does that mean for resources? You know, I've got a couple of people that work for me, and, you know, they are nearly full-time. They have other jobs as well. So it's not like, you know, they're 100% dependent upon me for their livelihood, but they're really like what we're doing at QuestFusion, and they're excited about it, and they're bought into the vision, and they do provide some key capabilities that are essential for executing on the strategy. A big thing about online platform development is being online. Online is very noisy. It's a very noisy world out there, and it's just getting noisier. And, you know, more video and more live video, and, you know, all these different social media channels, and each of the big social media companies are constantly changing their rules about, you know, how they prioritize stuff. And, you know, so one thing about building an online platform is don't build your house on rented land. You know, you need to have your own website. You need to have your own platform. You can't just rely on Medium or Facebook or Twitter, because they're going to change the rules on you. So have your own plot of land, and then think of social media as channels for, you know, educating your user base, educating and informing, you know, your audience, your tribe, your clients, and then ultimately driving business through those social media channels, just like you would any other kind of market channel, you know, and taking people through your sales funnel from awareness all the way to action. So, but I've seen companies that ended up being large companies that have kind of built their foundation on rented land, and they end up in very big trouble. The second thing is you need to think about marketing online in a very holistic way. And I think the days of the traditional advertising and PR agency are dead. I think digital marketing firms have stepped in to try to fill that gap, but they're primarily focused on SEO and SEM and SMM, things that you really don't want to know about or don't want to think about, but are very important to driving traffic to your site and driving your online presence. But they're not, they may say they're involved in content marketing and inbound marketing and email marketing campaigns and things like that, but typically they're not. They're specialists in one area or another. So one of the things we're trying to do at QuestFusion is kind of pull those things together and help small companies, whether it's a small business that's a solo entrepreneur, or what I think traditionally think of startups, you know, somebody that's eventually going to raise angel investment and venture capital. You need to have more than just an online presence. Even if you're a product company, you need to have an online strategy. And if you're not online, even massive companies, if they just have a website, but they don't have a comprehensive online marketing strategy and how they use all this stuff, in 10 or 15 years, they're going to be gone, even though they're massive companies. So I think that that's the combination of strategy plus the marketing component can be very valuable to startup companies. And that's where I'm starting to get more traction. Now, the challenge with this is there's so many tools. And, you know, there might be a free version of the tool and a paid version of the tool, and you have to learn the tool and how it works. And this is about social media management and social media marketing, and about, you know, search engine optimization, and about, you know, email marketing campaigns, you know, what's typically called inbound marketing. So there's all this stuff out there, and it takes time to just read up what these things do, test these products, see what works for you, see what would eventually work for a client, and piece together these packages. So that's also a resource thing. It's a resource thing where you can delegate that, and I have used an outside digital marketing firm for a portion of what I've done with QuestFusion for the first year and a half, and I'm moving away from that now. It's something where I feel like I'm at a stage now where I can, build that and do that capability myself or with my team. So it just takes time to kind of get through all this stuff, and that's with any kind of market, any kind of product. You need to test things. You need to test things intelligently and quickly, but at the same time, then make some decisions about what you're going to use in order to build your business.
Kind of break it so that then you can then figure out how to fix it again. Because I totally agree with you. Like a year or so back, when my presence online was just so minimal.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I'm on all the different sites and blogging and tweeting, like literally every day, tweeting, blogging very constantly. You're right. You have to kind of have a go at these things and work out how it fits for yourself, so you can work out how it fits for your clients. So you were saying, like, literally someone who's just got a minimum website or something. You're totally right. I mean, like, I see my children, 15 and 12 years old, how they use social media and Snapchat and everything, and they're getting they're getting online news. I found out a really important news article, I can't remember, it was about Brexit or something, from my daughter, and she got it through Snapchat. And so this stuff is cutting edge, and you're right, if you don't keep up with it, you will outplace yourself out of the market. So totally crucial. But then, like you say, balancing that with still a business head and strategy and all of that. You can't go too overboard on just thinking, oh, well, I'm tweeting and I'm posting on LinkedIn, therefore I should have lots of business. It doesn't really work like that. But
no, it's got to be holistic, and it's got to be comprehensive. But at the same time, if you're running a company like when I was running Entropic or Lincom or Pictos, I didn't have time to do this stuff. And your typical product marketing person that you're going to hire into a company like that, they don't have an understanding of it. Maybe if you are, in a luxurious stage, you can hire a PR person or a Marcom person, and they may have some limited understanding of this stuff. But this is typically in the area of, you need to outsource this, and you need to outsource this to a specialist, and you need to make sure that you can work with them and they can understand your strategy. So that's, if you look at kind of unique value proposition, that's kind of the QuestFusion unique value proposition. Is we have the strategy piece. We have a lot of experience. I have a lot of personal experience running startups, working with startups, and now I've got this set of marketing capabilities. And I'm, historically, even though I'm an engineer, I'm a marketing guy. I'm a product marketing guy. I'm a strategic marketing guy. So I can understand how this stuff fits together. Yeah. So it just, again, to be proven, but the initial receptivity around this has been pretty good.
So what type of leader are you then, Patrick, and what would you advocate as a leadership way? Because leadership is changing. It's changed, and it's now it's going through a metamorphosis, because it's no longer about the kind of the pyramids, someone at the top. Leaders now understand that it's all about getting in there, and that everyone's a leader in the business, and how can you enhance this and enhance what employees bring, and kind of review that more on a ad hoc basis. Because I think the whole idea, I see a future where you won't have a desk, and you won't even have a job. 1 week you'll be doing one thing, and next week you'll be like, well, what skills would you like to invest in next week, Rachel? And okay, go to that team and learn that. And people are going to be hopping about all over the place. So that's the sort of future I see, because people want to optimize what they've got. So how does that affect you, Patrick, with some of the leadership that you're talking about with your people?
Yeah, I would say my, you asked a question about my leadership style, and I would say it's situational, so it depends on the bigger set of market and customer things that are going on. It also depends on the person that I'm dealing with. Is that person super junior? Are they a more senior person? Or so I have to adapt to the environment, and I have to adapt to the person. And sometimes you even have to adapt to that person in different situations. If they're going through a divorce, or they're, having some emotional issues or whatever, that you're going to deal with them differently in that circumstance than if they're perfectly in a healthy place. So situational, I think, is the first thing. I think, the analogy I use is, if you're building houses, you're going to use a different leadership strategy than if the house is burning down. If the house is burning down, then you're going to grab a hose, you're going to be way more directive, you're going to be way more specific in terms of what you need people to do. And people say, well, I don't want to be micromanaged. And, if the house is burning down, you will be micromanaged, or you will be managed out. We can't afford to let the house burn down. Now, if we're building houses, it's like you give people a chance. It's like, hey, try this out. If it goes wrong, there'll be something there to catch you. The other thing is, in small companies, it's different than big companies. Small companies, there's kind of 0 points of failure. If you are the person that's doing that job, there's typically no redundancy. So it becomes really critical to hire people that have a much more capable skill set in those type of positions, and you're going to manage those people differently than somebody that is straight out of college, or straight out of university, and they may have a lot of intelligence, and they may have some good smarts, but they haven't had the experience necessary. I think one thing you do have to be cognizant, though, is and I don't like generalizations, but I'll use one here. Millennials are now getting to be reasonable age people. I mean, the oldest millennials are now, I think, 36 years old, and they range from kind of early 20s or to that age. And even the Gen Zs, which are some of my kids, teenagers, they're going to be in the workforce in 5-6 years. So it's a changing world. This generation wants to be managed differently, and they want to have. It isn't so much they want to be managed differently. I think people have always wanted to be managed a certain way, but we were brought up, you and I, in a much more dictatorial, very directive, very hierarchical type of structure. And I do think that there's value in having management and having somebody, I like to call it more coaching than management, to have somebody hold you accountable. I know for me personally, both in athletics and in business, if I've had a good coach that pushes me, I'm going to accomplish bigger and greater things with that person helping me and guiding me, and even being somewhat directive sometimes, than if I'm left to my own devices. And I consider myself a self-starter. I consider myself to be a hard worker. But if I got that extra push, then I'm able to accomplish bigger things. So I still believe in that. But the way you do it, the way you have to communicate with people, you have to take more time to explain, what they're doing and why it's important. And I've always been somebody that likes to focus more on the results than the how. You decide the how. If you want some guidance from me, I can give you some tips based on my experience, but I'm not the genius that knows every how in the world. You might know a better way to do this than I do, and I hope that you do. But this is the result that I want, and I need it in this time frame. So, let me know what you need to help accomplish that. The reason why this is important, this result is important in this time frame, is put it in the context of the bigger picture, put it in the context of the strategy and the vision of what we're trying to accomplish. And that allows people to get, more on board. I kind of like what Jim Collins said about, these topics, where it's like, get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, and then get the right people in the right seats on the bus. And I also like to think about it like growing crew. You need somebody that's calling the signals. You need somebody that's like looking over the horizon, that's providing the vision, providing the direction. But you need to make sure that the people in the boat all have an oar and they're all rowing in the same direction. Otherwise, the boat's going to be spinning around in circles instead of, racing down, the stream. So it's getting that alignment, making sure people understand the big picture, how what they're doing is important, and getting that emotional part. You can't, overstate the importance of getting somebody's heart and mind engaged on a project and having them get that feeling of winning. Because, and a lot of that's having the right culture, and then having the right people that you hire, not only for skills, but for culture and for cultural fit and for emotional fit, but then engaging those people in a proper way.
And that's where, Jim Collins says the right people in the right seat, but then
Right.
Simon Sinek says, is it the right bus? And this is where the millennials and the Gen Z, Y, whatever, they're coming in, because there's a whole shift in consciousness for them. And it's not necessarily about the money, what I'm going to get paid, is that, am I going to make a difference? And that has obviously, I don't know, we've just kind of gone from the industrial age of you have a job and you have a desk.
Yeah.
Now it's like people really don't care if they have the desk or not. They just want to know they're making the difference. And I don't really know what was it that shifted that, whether that was the internet or just, as I say, just consciousness piled up. It starts to shift very, very slowly. But going back, it was something I wanted to pick up on that you were talking about. And when you said about leadership, that was really interesting, because there was something when you said it and it flashed through my mind that apparently on 9/11, there's a true story, or well, at least I read it from Karen Kimsey House, Henry Kimsey House, where this homeless guy, and everybody had looked at him as a homeless guy, when the buildings were starting to fall down, he started to direct traffic. He literally picked up, the traffic flag or signal or whatever it is the traffic officers are using, and he took it upon himself to become a leader. So I think it's ultimately about, like kind of what you said, creating that right environment, and then people will become leaders. And I've been reading a lot of Marshall Goldsmith lately, who again is one of the world's top executive coaches. He's an American coach. I don't know if you've heard of him. And, he's talking about literally understanding it from another person's point of view, that you think that you're dealing with somebody who's at the helm of the ship. You just mentioned something about a ship, and that reminded me of him. And he tells a story, I don't know whether it's a story that come from Buddha or a very ancient story of a Chinese guy going upstream in his little boat with all his little stuff in his boat, and he's just trying to get there, and he's in a rush, and then there's this boat coming towards him, and it's like he can see the boat is going to hit him, and he's shouting, get out of the way, get out of the way, and like he's like paddling furiously, thinking, why doesn't this boat move? And he's screaming, and he's like, come on, you've got to hear me, guy. And finally, no one hears him. And because he stays on his true course, rather than deciding, I'm not going to get out of the way, the boat hits him. And then as he goes past, he sees that there's nobody in the boat. There's no driver in the boat. So the way that the story is always imagine in life and in business that you are dealing with unmanned boats, with driverless boats, because you might think that that person over there gets you or understands your strategy or knows the vision or has enough leadership skills, but you have to take 100% responsibility that what can I do, despite the fact that this is their job, this is their role, this is their policy. What can I do? And this is kind of, as I say, these new leadership styles that are coming in, understanding that it's now about people optimization. Gone are the days of product optimization. We've invented every product that there is out there. The only way we can define ourselves is by people. So I do think you and I are on the right tracks of what our services offer, which is defining and bringing optimal performance for people so that they can be the happiest and the most fulfilled, but also be the greatest that they can be, because that's all that's left to go, because we've invented everything else. So I just wanted to feed those things back from what you were saying. So it's the last component of leadership takeaways is all about insight and learnings, and we can have all the great vision and all the systems and all the great resources, and we fine-tuned our strengths and stuff. But
Yeah.
as all the great coaches say, if you're not learning, you're dying. Every day
Yeah.
it's about learning. So
Yeah.
what do you do, Patrick, every day to have this kind of ethos of how are you pushing and challenging yourself and taking on new insights?
Yeah, there's a few things, and kind of just tying off the leadership piece. I think your chances of success in leading a team are massively improved if you hire the right people. And I think this is a thing that's changed as well. Is we used to always just think about hiring for skill set, and I think it's very important to hire not only for skill set but for emotional fit, cultural fit, and doesn't mean a person is necessarily a bad person. They might be a great person for another company, but if they don't have the right fit with and philosophy of where you want to go, and this gets into some of the things you were talking about in terms of social responsibility. Let's say you have somebody that's like super zealous, and what turns them on and engages them is doing something that's about social responsibility. And yeah, you care about the environment, but that's not what you do as a company. So maybe they're going to be much more engaged with a company that does that. And, understanding, getting into somebody's head and not just looking at their resume and what their skills and abilities are becomes very important in terms of effective leadership.
Yeah.
But then getting to kind of learning, I think just generally, this is one of the biggest challenges that I see throughout my career with managers. And not, individual employees, they're in big companies, there's always training programs, there's always things like that. But with managers, especially first line managers, making decisions about underperformers in their organization. So having difficult conversations, people don't want to do that. And the more you do it, the more you learn how to do it. So some learning is about doing the difficult things that are important, and that's just part of the job. The other thing is being what I call being strategic. So strategic activities as a manager are hiring, setting strategy, engaging with, customers that aren't necessarily potential customers that aren't necessarily buying something today. So carving out a certain amount of time every day or every week where you focus on strategic activities. So those are kind of within the context of doing your job, be strategic and do the hard things that are important. Beyond that, I think you have to have development goals. I've got a vision for my life, and everything hasn't worked out in my life the way that I've always wanted it to. So sometimes you got to course correct and reset and do things differently. But that's not an excuse to not have a vision for your life and not have goals. And I've got business goals and I've got personal goals, and I let those goals guide me. And part of my personal goals is to continue to learn something new. I'm a reader, and I read business books, but I also read biographies and I read nonfiction, so I like reading. I like keeping up on some of the latest things that are going on. And, 20 years ago, I'd read the Wall Street Journal. Now I'm primarily on Twitter. And I think this whole fake news thing, you've got to be careful what your sources are. You got to do source checking. You got to do your own source checking. And more people are relying on the internet, not just Google search, but also social media channels for their news and information. And I am the same way. So we have to really be vigilant about is this real or is this fake? But engaging. So social media is about information, and it's also about engaging with people like you. I met you online, but you have a philosophy, and the way that you write and what you write about, I thought was very intriguing. We had a phone conversation, saw if there's ways that we could collaborate, and we found at least our initial way that we're collaborating right here. So keeping an open mind towards learning things from other people. You can learn stuff from books, you can learn stuff from online, you can learn stuff from other people, and always being open and receptive to doing those things is really important. I remember I had one of my companies, this was before I was a CEO, I was a senior executive for a company in Silicon Valley. And I was working for my boss, who ran all of marketing and strategy in this company. But I was also had a good relationship with the CEO, so he was my boss's boss. And my boss was one of those guys, I think at the time he was probably 35, brilliant guy, great marketing guy, one of the best product positioning people I've ever known or worked with, but he had stopped learning. He already knew it all. He knew it all. At 35 years old, he knew everything. And what a shame. What a shame for him, and it was a shame for the people that work for him too, but more so, what a shame for him that at 35 years old, he already knew everything. And, he's done okay. He's had a successful career, but not somebody that I really enjoyed working with. Fortunately, I only had to work with him for 6 or 8 months, but I don't want to be that person. I want to continue to be receptive. I want to continue to learn. I want to continue to grow. I want to know things, and things are constantly changing. So just when you think you do know something, you may not. I try to go into situations with the thought process of, even if I think that I know, listening as if I didn't. And a lot of times you may have thought you knew, but there's a subtle aspect to it or something different, or this situation or context is somewhat different. So if you can listen without judgment and listen for understanding, as opposed to thinking about what you're going to say as your response, you're going to learn a lot more. And you're probably going to be a lot happier, because you're going to engage with people in a different way than you would otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best piece of advice, and something I'm reading a lot on as well, is about being intrigued by Marshall.
Be curious. Get stupid and get curious.
And the greatest kind of business leaders of our time have said, if you want to be interesting, get interested. If you want to be loved, love people. If you want to be respected, respect people. So whatever it is, you do it towards another. And kind of, I think we heard it in the Bible, what we do to others, we should be okay with it being done to ourselves. And I think it's just one of the greatest philosophies I think a business person can take away. And I'm really glad you ended it on that, Patrick, because for me it's critical at the moment. That's where I'm focusing my time, is learning to stop and think and listen what people are really saying, and like you say, a new perspective, not what I know, and really being fascinated, and that's difficult when I do talk a lot and I enjoy talking, but I think that's key. And that was one thing I was going to ask you at the end of the interview, is what one key thing would you say from everything you know? And I would say that's pretty key, but I don't know if there's another key thing that you want to finish off on.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me in my life up to this point is you have to constantly be able to adjust. Because no matter how you plan things and how you do things, and things sometimes are not going to go your way. You are going to have times of adversity, and the people that are very successful, they navigate through those times of adversity. They don't let it blow them up. They don't let them completely destroy them, even if it's a very difficult situation. And I've had more than one myself, so you have to adjust. You have to pick up the pieces. You have to regroup, and you have to move on. And sometimes it's emotionally challenging to do that in the moment. But if you can do it and kind of move forward, things do get good again, as opposed to you having to kind of wallow in your own sorrow and poor me and how tough my life is. So those are the great success stories that I've seen in my life, and where I've kind of learned the most and accomplished the most is being able to deal with adversity in a productive and non-destructive way.
Yeah, Definitely. And I think that's probably when you make a good coach, and those who aren't dealing with it and running away are probably the ones burying their head in the sand, and they've, you know, maybe not got the amazing job, or at least not doing something that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's keeping all your, like you said, the strategy and the tactics at the same time. You can be as passionate as you want to, but is it really, you know, paying the bills as well at the end of the day? So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for everything you said. And, you know, I've learned some things as well, and I really appreciate your time here. And yeah, and I hope you find the useful with the interview and us being able to share it on social media. So,
yeah, this is awesome, Rachel. Thank you so much for your time and for being the catalyst to set this up. I've really enjoyed it a lot. It's been very fun. I love your style. I like, you know, your thought process, and, you know, I think you're really on to something with the work that you're doing. So I really appreciate you involving me in this.
Thank you. And we got the Hangout to work. You believed Hangouts doesn't work.
Google Hangouts, first time for everything. It actually
in
works
the UK as well, UK to America. So great. Thank you, Patrick, and have a really good day. And I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. Bye.